Good morning, everyone. Professor Potter, is always the delight to hear you. I heard you yesterday in Mumbai also. And what you say makes a lot of sense. Uh, I come from manufacturing sector. We are one of the largest producers of steel and electricity generation in India. So we do come from a socialism legacy. And there is a huge taxes. What you said about productivity, it makes a lot of sense. What you said about competitiveness, and when you say that productivity or competitiveness should not be because of low wages, or that your currency compared to the foreign currency is very much depreciated. So that makes a lot of sense. But in India, we are, I believe, too much dependent on the government policy. And that is because of the legacy of socialism. We have the highest taxes when it comes to royalty on natural resources, highest in the world. Then we have on electricity that we consume, we pay the highest electricity duty. So if we were competing only within India and everyone was subjected to the same taxes, it's not a problem. But when we are competing globally, how do we compete with the highest taxes and so much of cross-subsidization, like say railways? Indian Railways charges almost double to 3 times what railways charge in the US or in Europe or in Australia. We do not have waterways, so that comes to infrastructure. So with all these things, they do make manufacturing very expensive in India. And manufacturing is the key to get our millions and millions of youth jobs. Because not all those millions of youth are highly educated that they can go for services. So they have to go into manufacturing. So what would you suggest? Because there has to be a fine balance, because government needs taxes, and it is the industry that gives taxes. But again, these taxes become counterproductive and make us uncompetitive globally.
Well, you're raising really very, very important points, and you know, I think India's sort of had a model in the past that, you know, at some level is understandable. There's been a need. A lot of these taxes and fees are really how revenue gets collected, and this cross-subsidization has been sort of a practical way of helping a lot of very low-income people at least have some access, while sort of you know, extracting that from others in the society. And that works in a closed system, as you said. If we were just India Inc. and there was no other countries, and we really, you know, we could kind of be prosperous sort of by ourselves, that might work. What we know is that we can't move forward that way. So I think that over time we've got to get the taxation and the cost of these basic services like railways. We've got to bring ourselves into alignment with our competitors, and we can't use raising the cost of doing business as a strategy to improve the competitiveness of the country. We've got to start to rethink the way we do pricing and taxation to kind of put ourselves on a playing field with other countries that is realistic and allows manufacturing as well as other parts of the economy to compete. And we have to find other ways to build our revenue model in order to have the resources required to do what public services are necessary, particularly for the poor. And I think that it's always resisted to reduce the some of these subsidies. They're going to be, but we have to find another way of supporting low-income people than actually supporting them indirectly through, you know, subsidies for things that they buy. And I think the government, from my understanding, is starting to find hopefully some better ways of starting to provide support to lower income citizens without distorting the opportunity for the country to be competitive. Really, what you need to do is just provide support directly. You have to provide perhaps income support. We're seeing that in other countries. You have to provide income supplements so that the lower income people can actually pay a reasonable price for fundamental things that they need, like food and other services. We've got an equilibrium here that is going to be complicated to adjust, but the way we're doing it now, we're essentially shooting ourselves in the foot. Yes, we're doing that, and yes, there's a reason, but actually it's preventing us from getting into a better place where we actually can be more productive, where we have more manufacturing, where there's more job generation. So you're raising a very subtle point. There's a lot of things that got created in India for pragmatic, practical reasons. They reflected the circumstances here, but we now have, if we really truly want to get to a different place, we're going to have to slowly but surely unwind some of these policies without not remembering that we have a lot of low-income people that need a lot of help. We've got to find a better way to provide that support and a better way to provide that help. I would also say that India should do a lot more manufacturing. There's no question about that. At very least, we ought to be manufacturing what we need in India. Yes, we can hopefully be competitive internationally, but let's start manufacturing the things we need here. In order to do that, though, we're going to have to bring the cost of doing business down. We're going to have to make it possible for Indian companies to actually export. We're going to have to also not think that manufacturing alone is going to be the answer. We're going to have to develop. There's a lot of services that also don't require lots of skill. And so we need to grow job opportunities in all across the economy, in every field. And we got to get a positive cycle going where we get more efficient, the cost goes down for products and services, more people can afford them, we have a bigger market, we get more efficient, there's more jobs, we grow. We've got to get that positive cycle going, and right now we've got some barriers to getting that started. And again, the government has a very complicated challenge here to unwind a lot of fundamentally uncompetitive choices that were made for good practical reasons historically, but the circumstances today and our opportunity to get into a better place, I think, are going to force us to kind of rethink those policies. We've got to, as a society, we've got to convince our citizens that there's a better way. And it's not going to punish, citizens that need help. But there's a better way to do this. And so just because we've done it this way historically doesn't make it right.
Thank you, Professor Porter. I couldn't agree with you more. It makes perfect sense. On another note, you mentioned many times that governments do not create wealth. It is the companies, the public sector, it's the private sector that creates wealth and is the most productive and efficient at doing that. But obviously, with our socialism legacy, we don't think that. India has a huge public sector. In almost every field, governments of India, they've been running hotels, airlines, steel plants, mines, and in many areas, they are in a monopoly situation also. And when they are in a monopoly, say in terms of, say, coal mining, there's almost a 90% monopoly, then obviously the customers are not treated really like customers. And obviously it doesn't do well because they themselves are not very efficient, and it does not have a good impact on India's productivity or competitiveness. So what do you feel today in today's context? But every political party in India does feel very strongly about protecting its public sector. So what would you say about that?
Yep. Well, you're raising all the minefields. And the minefields are there. There's not a single, highly competitive, dynamic, and progressing country in the world that has a very large public sector-owned economic, footprint. I think we need to start migrating away from that. The starting point is to make public companies. It's very hard to privatize. We don't want to privatize everything. That's quickly. A lot of companies have made a disastrous effort at just selling things off. We need to start by running those companies better, making them more independent, having a board of directors, having really independent corporate governance. We see countries that have found very effective ways to migrate their publicly owned companies towards real companies and start expecting them to be profitable and start opening up competition so that the public sector guys don't have a monopoly. And again, there's no benefit to the society from having monopolies that don't have to be efficient. Essentially what they're doing is they're draining the resources from all the rest of us. And yes, they're employing people, but actually if they were more efficient and more productive, they could probably have lower prices, and therefore they'd have bigger demand, and therefore they could hire even more people. So we're stuck. Again, here's another example. We're stuck in an equilibrium that seems good with a certain backward-looking mindset. But if you think about competitiveness, and if you think about the reality of competitiveness, it's clearly we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So once again, I think this is not something I've heard a lot about during this visit. And as I talk more to members of government and others, I think this is an area that needs a fulsome discussion. But we need to migrate from public to private. We need to do it carefully. We need to be careful that that it's a win-win opportunity that actually not only allows those companies to get better, but also starts to create a more efficient situation for all the customers that are depending on those today inefficient companies. It's part of this new realignment that is required in a country that has been stuck with the legacy that we have. And again, I think we have to realize that there's going to be a lot of people that find this very scary. The people that work for these public companies aren't going to like the idea that they're going to be held accountable and they're going to have to do better, and that's okay. That's a good thing. But this is the unwinding process that is still underway, and so this is going to have to be part of the plan, the strategic plan.
Thank you, Professor Porter. I think on my last question, because Amit keeps signaling me that the time is getting over. You did raise a concern about competition in India. So I just want to assure you that in India, if it suffers from over-competition. There is too much competition. Wherever it is free, wherever people can compete, there is too much competition in India. In fact, that leads to sometimes problems because India is full of entrepreneurs. Everyone in India is very, very ambitious. They want to do big, and they have done extremely well. So in fact, that's why sometimes for the same resource, for the same project, instead of one person or two person chasing it, if there are 20 people chasing it, that sometimes leads to corruption also. That sometimes leads to many other challenges. So I just want to show you that India has a lot of competition. And in areas where I talked about public sector, a lot of public sectors are competing directly with private sector also. And those public sector companies are also doing as well as the private sector and internationally also. So where there is competition, it brings out the best. Like you said, that's what your concern was. The consumers must get the best services. So wherever there's open competition, there is, consumer gets the best, and those companies have really evolved and are world class, even though they are public sector. But where there is less competition, yes, there are challenges. So I think time is up. So I just like to thank you on behalf of everyone for being here, being in India, and definitely listening to you has been amazing. We got lots of good ideas. And I'm sure if we follow these, we can be more productive and more competitive. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naveen ji.